Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise. Today is the second day of 2025. It's January 2nd. Today is day 454 of the war between Israel and Hamas that began on October 7th of 2023. It's now extended to other parts of the Middle East. There's a temporary ceasefire with Hezbollah in Israel. And the front has extended to other parts of the Middle East, including Syria and other neighboring areas as well. So today is Thursday. I give a summary of what's happening, not only in Gaza, but in other parts of the Near East as well. I'll begin in Syria. Syria's rebel administration gave some foreign jihadist fighters senior roles in the Damascus new armed forces, according to sources. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, has said that the appointments are a token of recognition for the role and sacrifices of the Islamic jihadists in the struggle against the former President Bashar al-Assad. Elections for Syria might not take place for another 4 years, according to the HTS head and the country's de facto leader, Ahmed al-Shara. He said that on Sunday, citing the need to prepare infrastructure. And so we don't know when the next elections in Syria might take place. France carried out missile strikes last weekend on the self-styled Islamic State in different parts of Syria, as the country's armed forces minister said on Tuesday. And the ceasefire between Turkey and the US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces in the country's northeastern part of Syria. That ceasefire continues to hold, even though it's tentative, according to the Pentagon. They announced that on Monday. Earlier this week, at least 6 people were killed and others were injured as Israeli attacked the industrial city of Adra, which was in the Damascus area's countryside. The United States has expressed concern about Syria's new foreign minister and reports of a violent militant group's attack on Syria's minority groups, U.S. officials have said. In Lebanon, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OSHA, said Monday that 800,000 people have returned to their homes. We know that more than 1 million people in South Lebanon had formerly been displaced as a result of the war between Israel and Hezbollah, but still 160,000 people from South Lebanon have not yet returned to their homes. We know that there were about 60,000 people replaced or displaced in North Israel. Many of those still have not returned to their homes as well. Lebanese armed forces have arrested 300 Syrians who crossed by illegal crossings at the Lebanese-Syrian border. And Israeli media is reporting that Tel Aviv informed the U.S. White House of the Israeli plans to remain in Lebanese territory after the 60-day ceasefire has expired. This would be in direct violation of the ceasefire agreement if the Israelis do stay after that 60-day ceasefire has ended. On Monday, there were 5 people killed in the South Lebanese town of Kayam, according to UNIFIL, peacekeeping forces. A ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel looks like it's unlikely to be achieved before President Biden leaves office. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has renewed its insistence in recent days that Israel commit to a permanent truce. That was something that they had let go of for a while, and now they've returned to saying that a permanent truce is necessary for them to agree to a ceasefire deal. Israel has long ruled that out as a possibility. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority is taking on Hamas militants. I'll talk more about the West Bank in a few minutes. The Palestinian Authority yesterday temporarily suspended Al Jazeera's West Bank broadcasts and operations. They said that the network is provoking strike and interfering in Palestinian internal affairs, and an Israeli airstrike killed at least 10 people sheltering in South Gaza at one of the tent camps earlier today. That was Thursday, according to medics in Gaza. Other news in Gaza, 12 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip on Wednesday. That was yesterday. There have been daily deaths continuing in Gaza throughout the past week. There also have been terrible storms as cold weather has moved in. This was along the Mediterranean coastline. We do know that there was flooding where an Israeli road had to be shut down. And in Deir al-Balah on the Gaza Strip, Palestinians have been bailing out muddy water as their tents have been filled with frigid water from heavy rains in the war-ravaged Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of people have been living sprawling in tents along the coastline where winter has brought frequent rainstorms, and the temperatures this week have dropped below 10 degrees Celsius at night. We know that at least 6 babies have died from cold in Gaza in the past week, according to the UN Aid Agency for Palestinians. They reported that on Tuesday, as the plummeting temperatures have deepened Gaza's humanitarian crisis. 80% of Gaza's households have at least one child that's been going without food, according to UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. They reported that on Monday. And in Tel Aviv, Israel's Shin Bet Security Service said that it had arrested about 2,500 Palestinians in Gaza throughout the year of 2024. Of those, 650 had been interrogated. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority has been trying to prove that they can rule post-war Gaza. So they began the largest operation in 3 decades against militants in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority launched what's being called Operation Project the Homeland, and security forces for the PA killed 3 people, a fighter, a 19-year-old passerby on a motorcycle, and a 14-year-old boy. They arrested more than 24 wanted militants, they wounded others, and dismantled dozens of explosives. Last Sunday, they reported the death of a member of the Palestinian security forces. He was a member of the Presidential Guard. The Palestinian Authority also clashed periodically with militants over the last year. Since October 7th, 2023, security forces for the PA have killed 13 Palestinians, 8 of which were in Jenin, since Hamas had attacked Israel on October 7th. Late on Saturday night of last week, local sources reported that a journalist, Shaza al-Sabah, was shot in the head by security forces. These were, again, PA security forces in the Jenin camp. But the details of her death have been contested. The Palestinian Journalist Syndicate has called for an investigation. In Gaza today, I did mention January 2nd, 2025, there were Israeli airstrikes. The death toll was at least 17 Palestinians, according to different news reports. Israeli attacks on hospitals this past week in Gaza have brought the healthcare system to the brink of total collapse and may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity, the UN Human Rights Office said in a report that was published on Tuesday. And the World Health Organization's chief and several other human rights organizations earlier this week called for an immediate release of Kamal Adwan's hospital director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. He was detained last week by the Israeli forces after they raided the facility of Kamal Adwan. Many human rights organizations are calling for the release of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia. You can take a look at Hamoked. It's an Israeli human rights organization that did a report on Palestinians who are being held in Israeli prisons. They said that there are more than 10,000 security inmates that are being held in prisons inside of Israel. As of December 2024, they said that Israel holds 2,003 sentenced prisoners, 2,951 remand detainees. Those are detainees that have yet to they're awaiting trial. 3,428 administrative detainees. Those are detainees who are being held without any specific charges, without any trial, and that they also hold 1,772 people as unlawful combatants. Gaza's population has dropped by 6% in 2024, with 100,000 Palestinians leaving the territory, and 45,553 being killed as a result of the Israel-Hamas war by Israeli attacks, according to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. That was also a report that was released this week and published in CNN and other news outlets. On Monday in the Gaza Strip, there was an Israeli soldier, Yuval Shoham, who was killed in battles in the North Gaza Strip. He made the 40th soldier that's been killed in a military operation in North Gaza just since the start of the military operation last October. This week, the Shin Bet Security Services released a recording of one of the rescue operations of the private Orir Megadish, who had been an observer at the Nahal Oz base, who'd been taken into captivity on the Gaza Strip. The video can be seen in addition to the rescues of Fernando Marman and Luis Har when they were rescued by the Israeli Defense Forces in February of 2024. It's still believed that there could be dozens of hostages held alive in Gaza. Of the 251 who were taken captive last October, 117 were freed or rescued. Of those, 78 were freed in the initial deal with Israel in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. 27 were foreign or dual nationals who were released outside of that deal. Israel rescued directly 8 hostages in military operations. Hamas militants released 4 women for humanitarian reasons, and 72 hostages have been confirmed killed. Churches for Middle East Peace has been calling for a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire. Since October of 2023, we've been calling for a release of hostages and a release of Palestinians who are being held in Israeli jails without due process of law. We've been calling for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza, that the core causes of the conflict would be addressed. While Gaza's population dropped 6% in Israel at the end of 2024, the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics said that 59,000 Israelis left the country and did not return by the end of the year last year in 2024. So 59,000 Israelis emigrated and left the country, and approximately 33,000 foreigners entered Israel under the law of return. That allows individuals with connections to Judaism to migrate to Israel. Palestinians, despite resolutions passed by the UN, even if they have ties to the country, do not have the right of return. Israel's former defense minister Yoav Gallant yesterday announced he's resigning from parliament, the Israeli Knesset. He cited the law that promotes the exempt draft age for ultra-Orthodox men from mandatory military service, and thus he resigned from the Knesset. Yesterday, on Wednesday in Israel, hundreds gathered in Tel Aviv and blocked a main highway, rallying for a hostage deal. During a vote at the Knesset for the passing of an annual budget, there was a heated debate about the role of Finance Minister Ben-Gvir in the Israeli coalition, and several Knesset members called for Ben-Gvir's ousting. It's been announced also, in addition to Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent surgery and his prostate, that he does have prostate cancer. The current defense minister, Chief Katz, in Israel warned yesterday that if Hamas keeps firing rockets and continues to hold the hostage, Israel will have a much harsher response upon Gaza. President-elect Donald Trump reiterated his threat against Hamas at a New Year's Eve party, saying, I'll put it this way, they, referring to Hamas, better let the hostages come back soon. Shifting gears to Yemen and the Houthis, the U.S. military said earlier this week they carried out a series of strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, and the Houthi spokesperson said that the group was responsible for missiles fired at Israel from Yemen on Monday night, targeting the Ben Gurion airport and also a power plant in Jerusalem. One of the missiles fired from Yemen was intercepted before entering Israeli territory on Monday night, but sirens were activated across central Israel. Israel's ambassador to the UN on Monday issued a final warning to the Houthi militants to halt missile attacks on Israel, saying that they risk the same miserable fate as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Assad. In the United States, you might have heard of the U.S. Army veteran who killed 15 people in New Orleans using a pickup truck and bearing the Islamic State flag. The act is being investigated as an act of terrorism, according to the FBI. It was initially thought he might have been acting with the help of others, but it's believed now that he was acting alone. A Pentagon appeals court on Monday upheld the validity of the plea deals related to the September 11th case, which had ties to the Middle East, according to the military judge's ruling that the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin did not have authority to retroactively withdraw the validity of the plea deals. The Treasury Department on Tuesday announced new sanctions on Iranian and Russian entities over alleged attempts to interfere with the 2024 U.S. election. And President Jimmy Carter, at 100 years old, died this week. His legacy included monumental changes to the Middle East, including the historic peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, his controversial book on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict called Peace, Not Apartheid. Some are saying that it might have been prophetic, written decades before the current conflict and escalations. The Iran hostage crisis became a symbol, many argued, of his failed presidency. That crisis happened in November 1970. 1979, 52 American hostages held for 444 days. The Washington Post reported how for many who lived through it, they actually viewed President Carter as perhaps one of the most significant people who played a role in helping to bring them home, even at the expense of his own political career. The president's funeral services will be held starting this weekend in Georgia and in Washington, D.C. And earlier this week, Churches for Middle East Peace put out a statement standing in solidarity with the Episcopal Church and Ali Hospital in North Gaza. It was under attack by the Israeli military earlier this week, as were the other hospitals in North Gaza. The Episcopal Church put out a statement, and CMEP elevated their call for an end to the attacks on Gaza's healthcare system. In recent days, the Ali Hospital in Gaza City, which is a ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem, was hit by an Israeli strike, which caused further damage to the hospital, which already was operating at above capacity to respond to the ever-growing needs for medical treatments. So pray for our partners in all of the Middle East, that they would be safe, that they could continue their ministry of seeking to respond to the desperate needs of so many who are suffering and in pain, that they could continue to live out the mission of the church, that we could continue in our efforts calling for a permanent and comprehensive peace. May God go before us in this new year. It's only the second day, and already, dozens have been killed. War has continued to run in many ways unabated. And so our work of advocating for peace, it's never been more important. So as the new year begins, may we be strengthened in our fortitude and determination to advocate for justice and peace and end to war and all violence. May God go before us in the name of Christ. Amen.